It's about this time in the Easter season, the fifth Sunday, that we might begin to think, are we still in Easter? The chocolate and the roast lamb seem like a distant memory, and yet we are still in Easter. This Sunday is the Sunday to reignite and maybe re-engage. This Sunday is the day we refer to as Rogation Sunday. The next few days are Rogation Days, days during which we focus our requests to God for a good and bountiful harvest in the fields and in our lives. Thursday is Ascension Day. After 40 days of appearing to his disciples and others, eating, walking and talking, the risen Jesus ascends to heaven, a semicolon between his ministry and ours. 10 days after that, we're at Pentecost Sunday, the giving of the Spirit and the beginning of what we now call the Christian Church. All of this is to come. There is plenty of life left in Easter. Today, though, Rogation Sunday is often used as a chance to turn our focus towards nature, to give thanks to God and in particular, remember the farming community and their part in our complex society. It's a moment to remember, before we think about the birth of the church in 10 days, that the God we follow is the God of all creation. A moment to remember that it's not all about me or even about the church, because a God of all creation is all about everything and everybody. We're learning, perhaps too late, that our well-being, yours and mine, and all of humanity's, is directly and intimately connected to the well-being of the environment. And that after a century and a half of what we might now call wanton abuse, the environment, our environment, is damaged and broken. We have a long way to go to rebuild our relationship with the environment, our environment. We'll need more than an annual Rogation Sunday. Thankfully, we are doing more than that, and we should keep on encouraging each other to keep going. We're also learning, perhaps also too late, that my well-being and your well-being is dependent on our well-being, the well-being of everyone. If the God we follow is the God of all creation, if the God we follow sent his only Son because he loved the world so much, if the God we follow is graceful enough to notice me, just take a moment to say that for yourself. If the God we follow is graceful enough to notice me, the broken, damaged, selfish, hurting, shamed and lonely me. If I am to be included in the welcome acceptance of a God who loved the world so much, if I am the recipient of grace and love, then how do I manage to maintain a position that excludes others? Let's consider Peter. He was brought up in a society of very strict rules, of who was in and who was out. He knew that he was out. He was out because of his profession, his family business of being fisherfolk. He was now doubly out because he was a follower of the discredited Messiah who was crucified and supposedly risen from the dead. Peter's whole brain was wired to think about who was in and who was out. And it takes example after example of inclusive grace to convince him otherwise. We get a glimpse of that in our reading from Acts today. Acts is some of the recorded history of the early church, the very early church, right after Jesus had risen and the disciples were working out what happens next. Through a dream and a vision and a messenger, God had managed to get Peter in front of a senior figure in the Roman army, Cornelius, and his household. Some people who were definitely out. People who were definitely outside of any blessing that God might give, and definitely not people that Peter would want to be caught talking to. Even so, Peter was in the middle of explaining what he had witnessed with Jesus dying and rising when the Holy Spirit shows up and fills Cornelius and the whole household. I know that just the end of that sentence, the Holy Spirit shows up and fills Cornelius with his house and his household, will provoke a lot of questions and perhaps uncertainty. We don't have time to explore that today. However, even with only a whisper of understanding of what that means, the point is this: it's exactly what had happened to Peter and the other disciples and 3,000 people at Pentecost just a few weeks earlier for him. The point for Peter is that if God had included me, the broken, damaged, selfish, hurting and shamed fisherman, then why would he not also include these people? Who am I to say they are out when they are clearly in? Rogation Sunday is a day to remember that God is the God of all creation, everything and everyone. When I am struggling to include someone, I should remember that God has already included them. There is nothing that should separate them from the grace and love of God. Not my own sensibilities, or my social position, or my intellectual stance, or my political persuasion, or what I think about ethnicity and gender and sexuality, poverty, language, accent, dress code, education, or religion. Nothing should separate them. If God has included them, then who am I to say or act differently? You are in. You're welcome. Come and eat and drink and celebrate. For the grace of God is abundant and soothing and full of peace.